وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. الله
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone. I hope you're all well. Welcome back to our study, our conceptual study on the Quran. I am your host. Inshallah, I'll be your host for today. My name is Amal. Alhamdulillah, I hope you guys are all having a good Ramadan and a good fast today. Like we always start, we'll be starting with the recitation from the Holy Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah. And today our reciter is the same as yesterday, Sister Amina. Amina is from Edinburgh, and alhamdulillah, she's been studying Quran for over 5 years now. Assalamu alaikum, Amina.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Could you please let us know what ayahs you're reciting as well before you recite?
Inshallah ta'ala, I'll be reciting ayahs 60 and 61. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذ استسقى موسى لقومه فقلنا اضرب بعصاك الحجر فانفجرت منه 12 عينا قد علم كل أناس مشربهم كلوا واشربوا من رزق الله ولا تعثوا في الأرض مفسدين وإذ قلتم يا موسى لن نصبر على طعام واحد فادع لنا ربك يخرج لنا مما تنبت الأرض من بقلها وكثائها وفومها وعدسيها وبصليها قال أتستبدلون الذي هو أدنى بالذي هو خير اهبطوا مصرا فإن لكم ما سألتم وضربت عليهم الذلة والمسكنة وباءوا بغضب من الله ذلك بأنهم كانوا يكفرون بآيات الله ويقتلون النبيين وبغير الحق ذلك بما عصوا وكانوا يعتدون. And recall when Moses prayed for water for his people. So he said, strike with your staff the stone. And there gushed forth from it 12 springs, and every people, i.e. tribe, knew its watering place. Eat and drink from the provision of Allah, and do not commit abuse on the earth, spreading corruption. And recall when you said, O Moses, we can never endure one kind of food, so call upon your Lord to bring forth for us from the earth its green herbs, and its cucumbers and garlic, and its lentils, and its onions. Moses said, would you exchange what is better for what is less? Go into any settlement, and indeed you will have what you have asked. And they were covered with humiliation and poverty and returned with anger from Allah upon them. That was because they repeatedly disbelieved in the signs of Allah and killed the Prophet without right. That was because they disobeyed and were habitually. Sadaqallahul Azim.
Jazakallah khair for that beautiful recitation of the Surah Al-Baqarah. So today our speaker is a regular sister who conducts sessions in UKM. She also conducted a session last week in our study, in our conceptual study of the Quran. Today our speaker is Mediha Khan. A quick introduction is she's been a volunteer for UKM for a while, and professionally she is a financial risk consultant, and she's been teaching at the Markfield Institute of Higher Education. and she's also completed 2 years of in-depth Quranic studies course. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Madiha.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sister Amal. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. And if you need anything from me throughout the session, I'll be here to assist you.
Jazakallahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. I'd like to start with a dua. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilma. I pray that whatever we learn through this session is beneficial for us and increases us in our knowledge, inshallah. Just as a reminder, before beginning, I'd like to elaborate on what the layout of these sessions are. And it starts with it's a conceptual study, which we've mentioned before. So it's an exercise on contrasting, contemplating, and comprehending the concepts that we are presenting that day. So it starts with a contemporary viewpoint, which tells us what the worldview is about that specific topic. Then we move on to a cultural viewpoint, in which we discuss what our specific culture or different cultures surrounding that topic are. And then we finally move on to the Quranic viewpoint, as in what the Quran tells us regarding that specific topic. And we do incorporate a hadith as well as a reflective activity in the end. So the first thing I want to kind of elaborate on is the do's and don'ts. So I would like all sisters to, first of all, concentrate, because this topic is slightly slightly complicated, even though I've tried to keep it simple, and it's diverse as well. So there's absolutely no way that I can cover every aspect of this topic in 60, 70 minutes. However, I've tried to do it justice. Additionally, I'd like all the sisters to write down what they can, keep a pen and paper in handy, and not use the chat box unless asked to do so. And the reason is I want everyone to be concentrating on the topic at hand and not diverting their minds by typing in the chat box. So this session is interactive, and I will be asking questions, and I'll be asking the sisters to use the chat box when needed and unmuting themselves when needed. However, for the remainder of the time, I'd like everyone to just listen. Now, first of all, as I mentioned, this is a massive topic, and the purpose of this session is not to kind of cover every aspect of this topic, which is not, like I mentioned, humanly possible. But it's more of a food for thought session, like a taster session, and it's being done in order to increase awareness about this topic. And hopefully, this will spur you for further study and investigation in this subject. And as we mentioned before, our main goal is tadakkur and tadabbur, so contemplate and contrast the different ideas that we've been given. So like I mentioned, we're going to make it interactive, inshallah. Now, first thing I'm going to talk about is a general misconception. Before beginning, I'd like to talk about the general misconception regarding economics and finance. We think of it as being all about money alone, because unfortunately that's what our limiting view is regarding this topic. However, it's a combination of different aspects. It's our economy and our physical needs and our spiritual needs, our educational needs, our psychological needs, our emotional and moral needs. So we need to have a system that encompasses all these aspects of life. So we need to cover spirituality as well as finance and economics. We can't have finance and economics in a silo separate from the other aspects of life. So what we need is an entire system of life that has combined and unified all these different aspects in it. Any system that only covers parts of a man's needs but not all of them is not a complete system. So keeping this in mind, this renewed sort of concept of economics and finance as not being just about money alone, we're going to, inshallah, start this session. So first of all, we're going to discuss the contemporary or dimension or the worldview. And I'd like to start with the question. So what is the relationship of man with the money in today's world? What we would say the modern sort of definition of this relationship, what would that be? So if the sisters could just use the chat box to answer the question, like in one sentence, how would you describe man's relationship with money in the modern context? Any sisters, if you would like to maybe unmute yourself, raise your hand and maybe Sister Amal could unmute you. There's no right or wrong answer, sisters. It's anything that pops up in your mind when I mention man and money. Okay, okay, we have one answer in the chat box. Power. That's a good one. MashaAllah.
Noor has her hand up, so can we unmute Noor?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone. I think the relationship with money and man is generally everybody seems to be chasing money, and
Right.
a lot of materialism, and priority is the money in the world now. That's my opinion. Jazakallah.
Right, exactly. Jazakallah. It's very, very brief, very to the point, and you've hit the nail on the head. It's a highly materialistic society that we're in. A few more answers in the chat box. It's survival, highly regarded, especially in poor countries. It makes one feel important if we got more. And oh, that's a good one. There's a metaphor of a donkey and a carrot. Yes, mashallah. Very good answers. And it kind of gives you, it tells us that we're all on the same page, that we're living right now currently in a very highly materialistic society. And money is regarded as the ultimate goal, like gaining money and spending money and then gaining more money. So this is kind of what this is the kind of a picture of a snapshot of the current world that we're living in. Now, just a brief overview of the different kinds of systems that we have. In the past, there have been various experiments over how to have a viable economic and financial system. And I'll be discussing just two of the main systems in place today, which are capitalism and socialism. Now, capitalism is based on individual initiative and favors market mechanisms over government intervention. So the country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. And it's defined as an economic system where private individuals or businesses, rather than the government, own and control the factors of production. So entrepreneurship, capital goods, natural resources, and labor. If anyone's done something in economics, then they know that there's certain factors of production, which are these. Now, capitalism's success is dependent on a free market economy, which is driven by supply and demand. A free market economy is an economy where there is minimum government intervention and the market is left to its own devices to decide the prices of different products. Now, socialism is a system in which man's possessions are the government's property, and the government is the entity which decides the allocation of resources. It's based on government planning and limitations on private control of resources. So, with socialism, all legal production and distribution decisions are made by the government, with individuals dependent on the state for food, employment, healthcare, and basically everything else. The government, rather than the free market, determines the amount of output or supply and pricing levels of these goods and services. So these two are dramatically different systems of economics and finance. And the reason I've shared these is that, like, just to kind of contrast how different they are. One favors private entrepreneurship, the other favors state-controlled intervention. The common thing amongst both the systems is that the ownership belongs to the man, and there's no inclusion of religion or morality or ethics. Another common thing is that there is injustice in varying degrees on both in both systems, because at the end of the day they are man-made. Now, because we are living in a society which is for the most part capitalistic, we're going to be focusing on capitalism and its various disadvantages. So the discussion that we just had, it begs the question: is our money truly ours? And the capitalist system seems to think so, and tells us that our money is ours to do as we wish. We must understand that man's relationship with money was not always like this. It was the rise of capitalism in general and finance capitalism in particular, which led to consumerism. Now, this new culture of consumerism led to the demand for more manufactured goods. And it's this consumerism that built up over time and led to what we see now as a very credit based lifestyle, in which everything we want is bought on credit. Whereas in the past, people used to save up to buy houses, transportation, food, like both necessities and luxuries. What we see now is very, very different. We work more hours than ever before, earn more income, but save less. Personal debt has increased dramatically over the previous 3 decades, and consumer spending has been exalted as a virtue in the society. As a result, the average credit card holder now carries 4 different credit cards in his or her pocket, and home sizes have doubled in the past 50 years. We buy everything on credit, whether we are talking about cars or mobile phones or appliances or home furnishings. What does this mean? It means consumer debt has risen, and it's risen to 35% of household income, which is frankly speaking a lot. And to I found this quote on the internet which kind of summarizes it perfectly. Too many people spend money they haven't earned to buy things they don't want to impress people they don't like. And this kind of tells us the society that we're living in. Now, in addition to the cold, hard facts, there is the ethical aspect that we need to consider. We buy what we want, when we want, without giving consideration to why we are actually buying it, and if we even need that certain item or not. Everything we need is usually a click away, and we order items according to our whims. So so we idolize a certain segment of society, the influencers we see on YouTube and Instagram, and we wish to have their beautiful homes and picture perfect families and amazing holiday destinations, all the while not realizing that their entire lifestyle is manufactured and, in essence, it's fake. What all of this wanton consumerism leads to is israf, or excessiveness, or wasteful expenditure, which is highly disliked in Islam. So you can see from the pictures that I'm sharing that what we see on these social media platforms, Instagram, and sometimes Facebook and other platforms, is really not what's happening in the background. And the reality is really very, very different. So we have these amazing pictures of these luxurious bedrooms, which in reality don't look like that 99% of the time. Then we have these perfect, pictures of food and baking and coffee, and the background behind it all is like a complete mess. Then there's also complete editing of pictures to make to give a different version of the reality. For example, someone sitting on an armchair, whereas in Instagram, that person will show themselves to be sitting in a private jet. So there's many ways in which these influencers kind of perpetuate a fake lifestyle and makes the others wonder if there's something wrong with your own lifestyle. Whereas the fact is, these Instagrammers or these influencers don't even have this lifestyle for themselves. It's all 100% fake. Now, another aspect that I want to cover, which is basically the elephant in the room, is the widespread use of interest, which is another drawback of the capitalist system. And almost every part of our life is affected by interest, whether intentionally or not. So, here I want to ask the audience, all of you sisters, what aspects of your life have been affected by interest? We're all living, most of us, in the UK, and I know that most of us struggle with this. And even if we don't intentionally want to, we are affected by interest. So, can anyone please possibly raise your hand and contribute with their thoughts? Or use the chat box if you want. So think of what we have right now in our life and how interest has affected our life, how unavoidable it's become, in essence. Okay, our house. Good point, mashallah, Sister Noor. And that was something that I had in mind. Our houses are usually buying a house, buying a car, installments for big payments. Good job, mashallah. Loans for businesses. Yes. Has anyone heard the term or the saying that it's impossible to do business without getting an interest-bearing loan? Well, that's what I've heard all my life. Mortgages, which is I'd say that tops the list. Mortgages, because becoming a homeowner in this society is extremely difficult if we're trying to do it in the halal way, and extremely difficult. And the option left for most people is mortgages. I'm not justifying or sanctifying anything. What I'm saying is this is something that does affect a huge portion of the population. Buying cars, right? For the most part, we cannot afford to give 100% down payment on a car that we like, and most of the time we are usually either going for interest bearing loans, credit schemes, or right. So we have credit cards. True. Holidays. Yes, that's a very good one. So sometimes, most of the time, people who want to go on holidays usually have to take out a loan. uh, Pretty much every contract has interest if not paid on time. Yes, very true. You need money to start a business, then take business loans. That's what a lot of people say. Yes, that's true. There's something that people missed out. It's right there in front of you. Student loans, which is a big problem uh, for our poor students who all they want is to get education, but because education itself is for the most part so expensive for most students that they have to in the end rely on student loans, which are at the end of the day interest bearing. So this is a very huge, very common problem. Unfortunately, it's not something that I see being resolved anytime soon. So even insurance payments, yes, definitely. So by law, we have to we have to get car insurance for a car, and for the most part these insurance payments are interest bearing because what happens, the calculations that go on the background, they invest our money for us, and that money bears interest, which whether we like it or not is our money. That's part of it. Bank accounts, yes, that's true. If you're not opting out, then the banks will at the end of the day use your deposits to gain interest for them, for their benefit. Right. So mashallah, we have mashallah a good list of answers. So yes, so whether we like it or not, interest is part of the system and we are part of the system. So there's no way we can avoid interest. Okay. So now I want to consider another aspect of capitalism here, and that is basically the essentially that it's a system driven by selfishness and greed. Now it leads to an extremely selfish society, which also leads to a monopolization of resources and the ignoring of social benefit, creation of social division, and severe wealth inequality among the masses. On a personal level, there is no mandatory consideration for the poor or the destitute. Whatever you want to do, you can do voluntarily, but there's no mandatory consideration. On a government level, there is no mandate to extend a helping hand to the poor or war torn countries. What is voluntarily provided as aid is good, but there isn't any obligation to do so on the part of the wealthy countries. And this leads to further divisions. What does this mean practically speaking? Normally, a healthy society has three classes broadly: the wealthy, the middle class, and the poor. A well balanced society will have a large middle class and a small wealthy and a small poor class. However, without a system of circulation of money in place, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Now, what I'm sharing here is called a champagne glass distribution, which is a distribution of wealth, a visual framing of the world's distribution of wealth. If we observe the champagne glass distribution of wealth that I've shared, we see a distribution where the global wealth is divided into fifths, so 20% in each section. And unfortunately, if you observe the very top of the graph, the richest 20% of the global population own 80% of the world's wealth. So let that sink in. Only 20% of the world's population own 80%, over 80% of the world's wealth, whereas the remaining 20% of the global wealth is divided amongst the rest of us. These people, the one on the top tier, they live like kings with mansions and yachts and private jets and every type of luxury. And they have more wealth than most people can imagine. Then if you sort of categorize it further, there are people in the top 1% who are only barely 61 million individuals, less than 1% of the world's population, and they are estimated to hold more than 50% of the entire world's wealth. Now, this graph, this distribution is 10 years old. It's from a UNICEF report of 2011. However, I did find other reports that were recent that showed that this distribution hadn't really changed that much over the past 10 years. There was a very slight variations, but for the most part, it was the same. Now, the bottom 20% that we're considering, right? The very last bit of the graph, the very bottom tier, these are the poorest of the world, and they hold just 1.4% of the world's wealth amongst them. And these poorest of the poor scratch desperately for the most basic necessities of life. They own nearly nothing, and they spend their days just trying to survive. And unfortunately, with the way that things are in this sort of brutal economy, they very rarely are able to change their circumstances. They are born into this, and that is where they will most likely die, just trying to survive. So as you can see, this champagne glass distribution is showing a very a highly unequal distribution of wealth, and it just, on the face of it, it just didn't seem fair that so much of the world's wealth lies with so few people, and the rest are just trying to survive with what they have. But unfortunately, this is an outcome of a system as brutal as a capitalist system. Now, what I want to ask from the audience is, since this is an interactive session, as I mentioned, from what we have discussed so far, what can you deduce from the contemporary viewpoint provided regarding the current global socioeconomic and financial situation? What are your thoughts about what we've kind of covered so far? So, if anyone wants to raise their hand and participate, you're most welcome to, or you can use the chat box. So we've gone through a bunch of information regarding the global socioeconomic divide and a general individualistic lifestyles that are going more towards extravagance and luxury than not. And we've covered different aspects of the contemporary viewpoint. So what are your thoughts so far about this? Anything at all, sisters? Okay, so we have an answer in the chat box. It's greed. Yes, yes, 100%. It's a very selfish, a very greedy system that we're a part of. Unfair or unequal economic system. Okay, yes, very true. Hardly seems fair to have such an insanely unfair distribution of wealth. Then we just burden ourselves. Okay, very true. It's a system that's made to be almost impossible to change and very unfair. Yes, that is very true. It doesn't seem fair. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. Yes, I agree. So it's kind of like a trap where there doesn't seem to be any way out or any sort of solution. There's another answer. People do not have a fair chance to get out of poverty even if they want to. Yes, very true, Sister Hajar, very true. So, mashallah, we've got a good bunch of answers. So, moving on, we're going to be discussing the cultural dimension, inshallah. So, culturally speaking, our relationship with money has not been a very healthy one. Whereas our ancestors saved every penny and cut back on every possible luxury in order to make ends meet, what we see in the current generation is a shift towards wanting luxuries. Now, we also observe that there are two extremes in the society. On the one hand, we have a certain segment that believes money should be spent as they wish. So, this segment loves to buy the latest iPhones, flaunt their Gucci bags, and redecorate their homes every 6 months. And when asked why, their answer is because I can, I have the money. On the other extreme, there is a segment that believes that money is the root of all evil, and they equate living simply with poverty. Whereas these two are very different concepts. If we do not spend this money, Wait, sorry. Allah has given us money to spend on the resources we need to spend our life. If we do not spend this money where needed, then we are not using this money for the purpose it was given to us, right? Now, there is another sort of extravagance that has infiltrated into our society, and that is the excessive spending around events such as weddings and funerals. Now, in Islam, it's pretty simple: the nikah and the walima, right? Just two, with food being served to guests only in the walima, right? According to the Sunnah. Whereas what we see in our culture is a massive queue of events spanning over a month at least, with excessive spending in each of these events and a flagrant waste of money and food and resources. So the couple and their respective parents begin their new life together, having either spent their life savings completely or having fallen into massive debt in order to appease the social societal customs. Then there is the general lack of knowledge we see surrounding financial matters, especially amongst us women. Now, apart from the people in our friends and family circle who are directly involved in the field of finance, we generally don't know much about finance. Now, come Ramadan, how many of us are yet again confused about how to calculate our zakah and what falls under zakatable income? Now, we go through this process every single year, and every single year we are yet again scratching our heads in confusion about how to do it. So, similarly, how many of us know about the kinds of contracts that are mentioned in the Quran? On a personal capacity, we don't try to gain knowledge about finance, and we believe finance means money alone, which is, again, a huge cultural misconception. So, we've covered two dimensions so far. We've covered the contemporary dimension and we've covered the Quranic dimension. Now, we're going to move on. Sorry, we've covered the contemporary dimension and the cultural dimension. Now, we're going to move on to the Quranic dimension and what the Islamic system tells us about economics and finance. So, first of all, the Islamic economic and financial system is not an entity on its own. It's meant to be followed as part of a complete Islamic way of life, and we can get the best benefit out of it when it is part of that system and not in a separate box. Secondly, the main difference between the Islamic economic system and the other various Western systems which we've discussed is the goal. In the Islamic economic system, the ultimate goal is success in the hereafter, or falah in the Arabic terminology, and to fulfill the basic human needs. And the economic system is a means towards that end. Now, this is a completely different paradigm. Islam recognizes private ownership, it approves of making profits, and does not prohibit self interest. However, all of these come with some do's and don'ts and are regulated. Something like human self interest, although accepted, has been given moral bounds as well as a condition of success in this world and the hereafter. So, self interest is focused on the provision of needs rather than wants. Now, the ultimate goal, if you think about it, the ultimate goal of both kinds of systems is the same: acquisition of provisions. However, in one system, it becomes the purpose, whereas in the other system, it is merely a means to an end. And what's the end again? To achieve a higher purpose in life, inshallah. So, first of all, the sorry, I happen to repeat the same. Yes, okay. Now, we have different ayahs in the Quran regarding wealth and how to spend it. So we have this ayah from Surah Baqarah: الذين ينفقون أموالهم بالليل والنهار سرا وعلانية فلهم أجرهم عند ربهم ولا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. Those who spend their wealth in Allah's way by night and by day, secretly and publicly, they will have the reward with their Lord, and no fear will there be concerning them, nor will they grieve. So this is from Surah Baqarah, ayah number 274, and we see that the message here is about spending wealth, either secretly or publicly, but this emphasis is on spending it, right? So we can kind of see what the Islamic system is telling us about these concepts, right? And another ayah in the Quran is الَّذِي يُؤْتِي مَالَهُ يَتَزَكَّى, those who spend their wealth for increase in self-purification. So this is from Surah Layl, ayah number 18. Again, we see the emphasis on spending wealth, and the purpose that that's been sort of cited here is self-purification or tazkiyah, right? And another ayah that we have is وَأَنْفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إلى إلى التهلكة وأحسنوا إن الله يحب المحسنين. Surah Baqarah ayah number 195. And spend in the way of Allah and do not throw yourselves with your own hands into destruction by refraining. And do good. Indeed, Allah loves the doers of good. So the message that we're seeing here again and again and again is spend. Spend in the way of Allah. Do charity, and and give sadaqah, and give your wealth, and as a means of purification and protection and protecting yourself from the hellfire. So you can see kind of what the spirit of is the spirit of this idea is, how what Islam teaches us about different about wealth and the different concepts surrounding wealth. And we have one specific ayah with specific commands regarding zakah. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم. Zakah expenditures are only for the poor and for the needy and for those employed to collect zakah, and for bringing hearts together for Islam, and for freeing captives or slaves, and for those in debt, and for the cause of Allah, and for the stranded traveler, an obligation imposed by Allah, and Allah is knowing and wise. Now, this very famous ayah specifies the 8 categories of zakah. And these categories kind of, if you see this chart that I'm sharing, these categories kind of show you the different aspects that are intended to be covered through the institution of zakah. So 5 of these categories: the poor, the needy, those in bondage or the slaves, those in debt, and the stranded traveler. These categories cover poverty relief and economic empowerment, right? And the other 2 categories, for the cause of God and for bringing hearts together, is intended towards community development. So you can see how just through just one aspect of the Islamic system, which is the institution of zakah, covers so many different community and economic development aspects, right? So we're not only, the ultimate goal is not only eradicating or lessening poverty, but it's also empowering those people and giving them the tools to get themselves out of poverty, right? So and then there's also these aspects of community development. So it's not just about the poor, it's about building a community that is strong and unified and able to withstand so many things, right? So there's different aspects covered through just one institution, which is zakah. Now we've discussed different aspects. We've discussed different systems: the capitalist system, the socialist system. We've discussed the Islamic system. Now we know that the things that are happening around there, there's something that's gone severely wrong, and that there are issues with what we are facing today, which we discussed in the previous slides. So one of what are the possible reasons that things have gone so wrong? So one of the things is that we see is a lack of morality, right? So what did we learn from capitalism? That there is a severe lack of morality and ethics, right? So people participating in the capitalist system don't believe that Allah is the owner, and they try and justify rights and wrongs by their own rules, right? So it's a brutal system, it's an unethical system, and the concept of private ownership goes so far that people think that there is no accountability at all. So gains and profit are the ultimate goal, no matter what the cost, right? So there is a severe lack of morality in the system. Then there's lack of free market. For example, we see varying prices of one item when we go shopping. How do we usually decide what we want to buy? Right. For example, I went shopping. Right. I went to buy some groceries, and I need apples. Now, how do I usually decide which kind of apple I need to buy? Right. I look at the prices. Right. So we usually go for the items that are priced less. Now, the market here is the one that's deciding where our needs or wants lie, instead of leaving it up to the people, right? Then there is a severe imbalance between skills and justice. What does that mean? means that we are sometimes considering the skills without considering the justice aspect of it. We're giving priority to abilities sometimes, but not to justice, right? For example, we hired someone based on their skills, and the other candidates for that job, we didn't consider their different, how they would, what they would bring to the table and how this job would impact them. So it's a very cutthroat and very sort of a dog eat dog world that we're in. And what we are lacking in justice, we are kind of trying to make up for skill with skill. So we're trying to upskill ourselves in different ways, but the justice aspect disappears. Then there is another aspect about the sort of imbalance that we're experiencing, and that is trying to make money from money, right? Now, what does that mean? Mostly, in today's world, especially with the rise of entrepreneurship in recent times, we've seen we've seen a worrying trend in which people are trading in something that's very intangible for money, or they're trying to make money from money, which again is not allowed in Islam. For example, like I mentioned, the influencer lifestyle previously. Now, this lifestyle, these influencers actually make a lot of money, right? They're selling a very fake lifestyle, and they are making money through the ads and through the number of the engagement and through the ad placements that they have on their accounts. Now, what they're selling is completely intangible. They're selling an idea. They're selling a fake lifestyle, but they're seeming to make money from it, right? So similarly, we have different speakers on different topics who are making money from motivation. I'm not saying it's unethical. What I'm saying is that this concept of making money from thin air or making money from money itself is something that is maybe kind of frowned upon in Islam, because Islam prefers a more what I say solid approach to it. Now, how does this impact our reality, right? How does this impact us in a practical sense? We do not believe that Allah is the sustainer and the provider, right? We do not believe sometimes, most of the time, that the resources that we have on this planet are enough for the growing population. We've had this discussion for dating back to 100, 150 years, where different economists have categorically stated that the resources provided on this planet are not enough or will not be enough to sustain the growing population. So either you go towards population control, or you try and artificially produce more resources. So we have artificial growth of vegetables, which comes again from this concept that the resources are not enough. And this implies that Allah has created us, but did not create enough resources for our survival. Na'udhu billah. Right? So we're not truly acknowledging Allah as our creator and our sustainer. Now, we are briefly just going to discuss the foundations of the Islamic economic system, and we will look at the overall needs of a person, which include again his physical, his social, his educational, and his psychological needs. So we are providing a guideline in each area, and the foundations of an Islamic system includes the following things. So first thing is Tawheed, where we are acknowledging that Allah is the owner and the sustainer of this world. And everything that we own, our assets, our inheritance, are not truly ours, but rather they belong to Allah. So this idea, this instills a sense of responsibility in us whenever we spend money, a sense of that this is not something that truly belongs to me, and it's an amana on me, right? The second thing, which is called rububiyah, or the lordship of Allah, means recognizing that Allah has provided enough resources for this population. It's a sense of trust in Allah and trusting Him to be our true Lord and sustainer, not just through our words, but this belief should be in our hearts. The third thing that we're considering is guidance, or hidayah. So this rububiyah should automatically lead us to hidayah, right? Which again should lead us to risala, or prophethood, right? And then there is the understanding the vicegerence of man, understanding that this system is the best system for us, that we have been sent to this world as a khalifa, and this world has been given to us to support to help us in our khilafat. Also recognizing that our wealth is not a purpose, it is a need and a resource and a means to get to our goal, but it is not the goal itself, right? Something which is in contrast to what the capitalist system tells us. Then there is self-reflection and self-purification, or tazkiyah, where in which we check ourselves continuously and we check our intentions. And is it possible that we are assuming that this wealth is our right and something we deserve instead of an amana and a responsibility? If there is this sort of possibility, then we need to check our intentions again and again and again. It's a continuous process. We cannot just do it once and then forget about it, right? And decide that, okay, my intentions are pure. No, this is something that you need to do continuously for the rest of your life. Then there is the concept of adl and ihsan, which is justice, or trying to achieve justice with what we have been given. And also the ihsan concept, which I forgot to write here, is trying to do more than what is due from us, than what is expected from us, right? Then the next foundation that we're discussing is falah, or success, right? So what is the rule again for success for us? Success is not something that you see from the outside. It doesn't come from, it doesn't factor in your wealth or the make of your car or the style of your house or the size of your wardrobe, right? It's not something that, or the size of your paycheck, for example, right? It's not something that can be quantified like this. It's something that comes from the inside, right? Again, remember the ayah, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّاهَا, right? The person who succeeded is the one who did tazkiyah, who managed to purify himself, right? So again, we need to kind of reorient our definition of success. And the final thing that we need to remember is that we are accountable for every single thing, every pound that we spend, every need, and every want. We will be accountable for it eventually. Now, there is something else that I want to, one last thing that I want to stress on is this is an article from Professor Khurshid Ahmed, who is one of the founders of the modern Islamic economics, and he's a master in his field. He noted down different levels of spending in the Islamic system, and these different levels tell us where we are basically right now in our life. So the first is absolute needs, right? These are the things that we need to stay alive. For example, food and water, right? And then there comes the indispensable necessities. And it's possible to live without these things, but life would be extremely difficult. For example, shelter, right? Or, for example, functional wardrobe, right? Or shoes. So you can live without them, but it would be very, very difficult to do that, right? Then there are facilities. So we get ease in life because of these things. For example, cars, right? Or how about mobile phones, right? So they're halfway between a want and a need. So you could say that, right? So it's not exactly a need, but it's not exactly a want either. It's somewhere in between. Then the fourth thing that we're discussing is decorations. So these things are basically there to accessorize your life and kind of make it more beautiful, more happy for yourself, like easy for you to live in, right? There's something that kind of gives you some happiness, but they're not needs, right? They're wants, right? They categorically come out of the category of needs and go into the category of wants. So they're something extra, right? But you won't say that it's forbidden to have this in your life. It's allowed, right? It's mubah, it's allowed. Then the fifth level that we're discussing is luxuries. Now, luxuries are things that are halal and allowed, but you end up spending so much on them that it becomes prohibited. Right? Now, for an example, nikah is halal. Celebrating the nikah, also halal. But if the bride and the groom rent out an entire stadium and invite 10,000 people and decide to enter on the back of an elephant, right, then that's very much not allowed. It's a luxury, right? You're spending far too much on something that would have been allowed if it was done in a simpler manner, right? And the sixth and final thing, excuse me, is extravagances. Now, these are things that you acquire through the un-Islamic, unlawful, and immoral spending of money, right? So these are definitely categorically not allowed, and it's a misuse of your money. It's a misuse of your wealth. Now, considering all of these six levels of spending or categories of spending, the first four come in the category of things that are allowed, right? Of things that you can have in your life, the absolute needs, you need them, the indispensable necessities, the facilities, and the decorations. All four of these are allowed. You are definitely allowed to spend money on them, right? However, the last two things, the luxuries and the necessities, luxuries and the extravagances, are definitely not allowed, right? So we need to have a deep look at our life and where we're spending our money on, and figure out which category of where we lie, right? Are we edging out from the allowed levels and into the ones that are prohibited? Like, are we kind of moving from decorations to luxuries without even knowing about it, without even thinking about it, right? So, right at the end, I finished this far quicker than I expected, but that gives us more time for reflective activity. So I would like sisters to consider these two questions. First of all, this relates to our very last slide. How do we weed out luxuries and extravagances from our lives if we do have luxuries and extravagances? And the second question is, despite the high level of charitable activity on a global level, why are the poor getting poorer? So, the first question, can any sister please raise her hand and share what she thinks? Right? So, we need to have a good look at our life and try and figure out a way of weeding out luxuries, right? For example, you for the longest time you've worn a certain expensive brand of clothing and refused to go any lower, stating that you don't like the quality, right? And the extremely expensive brand of clothing is in fact extremely expensive. So can you maybe perhaps live without that brand of clothing, right? Or perfume, or a certain expensive car that you're spending far too much on. So what process can we put in place to eliminate these luxuries and extravagances from our lives? If any sister would like to raise your hand, maybe, or use the chat box. So we have an answer. Change our mindset and go back to Quran and Sunnah. Okay, mashallah. But my question is, how do we go about doing that? What is the sort of practical approach that we can take?
So we just had a hand up and it's gone now. Okay, there we go.
It's up again.
Yeah.
So sorry, Assalamu alaikum. Because my
Walaikum salam.
daughter was making a noise, so I said, put my hand down. The best way of helping out with the charity work is, instead of giving just food, we should allow and create opportunities for people to get employed, so that we are helping them for the first time, and then inshallah they can help them out themselves in the longer run. So instead of just focusing on how the ummah can get enough food for every day, we should also focus on creating opportunities for people to gain employment and education, so that inshallah they will be able to help out themselves and others in future. Hopefully I've
Right.
answered it.
Yes, mashallah, you've done a really good job. So basically empowering people and creating opportunities for them, for themselves to sort of dig themselves out of their situation, right? For giving them the tools that they need, instead of just giving them something that will eventually go, like food. If you provide them food, it will eventually disappear, and then they'll be back to square one. But if you give them the tools to seek employment in order for them to buy food for themselves, you're empowering them, right? So we have an okay. Do we have any other answers in the chat box, maybe?
I think I'd like to contribute actually for the first question. I think,
Yes.
at least personally, I think it's a good habit that I've tried to do is every month look at your bank statement. Like you said, we normally work through cash is slowly becoming extinct now. We only really, use our cards. So when we look at our bank statements, actually look at it and say, what am I spending my money on? Like, where is that going? Is it something I need? Was this something I needed? Or did I just do it out of like an extravagance or just my desire? And doing that monthly, I think it's really easy to see what you're spending money on and if you really need it or not.
Right, mashallah. And this cashless society is honestly, it's such a, it's going to be the bane of our existence. I have to say, I'm not saying that literally, but this cashless society contributes to so much extravagant spending. I just saw a video on an Amazon Go shop and how it works. You just come in, you stroll into the shop, you scan a barcode, you put everything in your bag or your pocket, and you just stroll out. Right? How are you supposed to keep a check on how much you spend if you just grab things off the shelf and just leave the store, right? And this really contributes to this habit of overspending or spending on things that you don't need because everything is a click away, right?
Yeah.
So okay, we have an answer in the chat box. We set realistic budgets for things we need that are affordable without being luxurious. Yeah, so be practical about it. And most for the most part, women are in charge of the household budget for the most part, right? They're in charge of the grocery shopping, they're in charge of clothes shopping, they're in charge of everything. So we can't say that we don't have any experience in this. We are basically trained in this by over a course of time we do become trained in this. So setting realistic budgets and then making sure you don't exceed that budget unless absolutely necessary is a way of, again, trimming that aspect from your life where you're overspending on things that you don't need, right? Now, i'm not I'm not sort of enforcing the concept that you're not allowed to spend on things you like. You are allowed to spend on things you like, but like I mentioned, there is a difference between decoration and luxury. Luxury is goes in the category of israf, where you're just spending far too much on something that is supposed to be halal, but because you spend so much, all of a sudden it's now in a prohibited category because you spend too much in israf and tabzir and spending and then showing off that that certain item, whatever it is. So we have another answer. Yes.
Yeah, we have a hand up actually. Hajra, can we unmute you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I actually just had there's something that you mentioned about the bank statement, and there's this book, Profit First, by a person called Michael Michalowicz, and that's really, I find, because we have this advantage. Yes, we're in like a cashless society, but we have these statements that we can see literally every little like pound that what we're spending on what we're doing, and there's a sort of concept in there that I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there's this idea of having percentages for your spending. So how much percentage you want to give in charity per month, how much percentage you want to spend on your actual, needs like your groceries and household bills, etc. And that's very, very a very useful way to actually realize how much you're spending on unnecessary and other, other like, almost like on the fringe sort of aspects in your spending and other things. And I think it really I've started doing it with like there's certain things that I've started doing it with, and it's really, really helpful. And it's personally really helped me to realize that, oh, this is how much you actually spend, and you get you can sort of like see month to month as well. So yeah, inshallah, that was just something I wanted to mention. So,
Mashallah, that's so useful, Hajra. And yeah, I'll definitely be doing that for myself. You can just text me the exact name. And the thing is that we all know what our weak spot is. We know what is our weakness and where we tend to overspend, right? We know better than anyone else, right? So for some people it can be shoes, for some people it can be clothes. I have a friend who owns around 16 pairs of shoes, and she just cannot seem to stop herself, even though I've told her multiple times. So we know where our weakness lies, right? We know, some for some people it's perfumes, for some people it's they have a sweet tooth, and it just, they go overboard when grocery shopping. They buy far too many sweet things, which is bad for the health anyway. So we know where we need to cut back on, right? So again, it starts from ourselves. We know where it is that we need to kind of restrain ourselves. Okay, so we have some answers in the chat box. There's always cheaper alternatives. Plus, we need to get more into recycling lifestyle. It's beneficial in many aspects. Yes, the sustainability aspect is pretty amazing. Like, instead of throwing away clothes, give them away. Please don't throw them away, or reuse them. Right? Just, sewing is a dying art. So try and reuse things that, otherwise you might have thrown away. Right? Upcycle, recycle, right? Find alternatives to things that you feel like you're spending too much on. For example, a decade or so ago, my sister and I did an exercise in which, when we went grocery shopping, this was when we lived in Pakistan, instead of buying imported products, we decided to buy alternative locally sourced products that tasted almost as good as the important ones. And our grocery budget went down significantly. So that was something that was a kind of a successful exercise, and it was fun doing that, trying to figure out which of those products which we could exchange for something that was a cheaper alternative. So we have another answer: prioritize if you need things, or can you do without it. Yes, that is something that we must keep in mind before making any sort of purchase. Ask yourself the question: do I need this, or do I want this? Right? And make sure you're not confusing the two things. Need this, right? If necessities are things that you need, like you have a pair of shoes, a pair of walking shoes, for example, right? And they broke, the heel broke. So you are justified in buying yourself a new pair of walking shoes, right? However, if you decide to go all out, right, and buy three different pairs of Nikes and four different pairs of Converse, that's probably going a bit too far. So again, you need to ask yourself this question before making any sort of purchase, right? Is it a want, or is it a need? If it's a need, you're justified. If it's a want, again, think of it. Think about whether how much you really want it, right? So yes, alhamdulillah, we have.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah, very practical points coming from sisters. I was thinking on this, this psychology of shopaholics, and what I have, sometimes we also all go through that cycle. So, the mood swings and emotional buying, it is all waswasa of shaitan, isn't it? Because if we really, analyze it, once we get that thing, all those all that happiness or excitement or that dopamine surge, it is all gone, and we start looking for something else now, and especially with this adverts culture which come into our phone every second. So I think it is really now down to the psychology, that we have to engage ourselves in something positive, in something constructive, so that our mind cannot be lured into that psychological trap of shaitan.
Yes, mashallah, Dr. Sadi, you've put it so eloquently. It's really this ad culture, this consumerism, is really very difficult to kind of abstain from, I would say. So just having a good overview of your kitchen cupboard, you'll come across so many things that you bought on a whim and never used again, right? Some sort of appliance, some sort of handy kitchen gadget, some sort of tool that you decided that you couldn't just live without, and eventually after one use, it was resigned to your junk drawer at the bottom of your kitchen. So this is something that we need to kind of actively work at eliminating from our life, inshallah. So does anyone else want to contribute? Right. So there's answer to question 1. Turn off notifications for shopping apps and avoid temptation of signing up to credit cards unnecessarily. Oh wow, yes. The temptation of signing up for credit cards. I can't relate to that, but notifications from shopping apps, yes. How many shopping apps does everyone have on their phone? I have around 10 different shopping apps, and the different notifications, especially when there's a sale going on, sometimes it just kind of lures you in, and you find yourself all of a sudden with a cart full of stuff that you never needed in the first place. So yes, these shopping apps are really very, very irritating, and they're one of the number one reasons why sometimes you end up with a very small bank balance as opposed to what you might have had if you had kind of ignored them. Right. So does any other sister want to contribute? Especially if there's a sale. Yes. This sale culture is really, really bad. Also, okay, we have another comment. Also, email subscriptions, they keep luring you in with deals. That is absolutely true. Has anyone else caught up in the craze of Black Friday or Amazon Day sales? Or is it Amazon Day? There's Black Friday, then there's Boxing Day, right? These three kind of consumer events that lure you in, and Prime Day, yes, that's the one, Prime Day. And you end up buying so many things that you never thought you needed in the first place because you actually didn't need them, right? So this consumer culture, if you look at your calendar, it goes all year round. You start off with Boxing Day in January, then you go on to Easter, which is in April. So you have lots of sales going on then. Then you have summer clear out sales in June and July. Then you have Halloween type things in October, right? And then come end of October, November, you've got early Christmas deals coming on, and then the cycle repeats itself over and over and over again, right? So this consumerism leads this sort of sale culture leads to an excessive buying, and for the most part, these sales are not that great sales anyway. They're just an excuse to kind of lure you in, and then once you're in, you end up buying something. So there's another comment. Social media influencers don't always get convinced into products social media influencers are always promoting. Yes, these social media influencers are always paid to promote a certain product, and it can be a horrible product, but because they're paid to promote it, they're going to promote it. So I would say just this influencer culture itself is pretty bad, and just kind of unfollow as many of these influencers as you can, because I've never felt any good coming out of it, because whatever you see them doing, wherever you see them going, their exotic holidays, their so-called picture perfect homes, it usually leaves you with a sense of kind of it leaves you depressed for the most part, and whatever they're kind of egging you to buy, you end up buying it and kind of feeling disappointed at how not good that product is. So mashallah, we have had such a great interactive session, so many inputs from so many sisters. Okay, so for the second question, the root cause of poverty needs to be solved, and vocational charity products should be launched. Yes. So we've discussed the first question in length. The second question, a sister at the beginning mentioned it, and the second question leads us to how we are spending our charity, where we are spending our charity, and how we are doing it. So are we just blindly giving our money towards projects that are not going to empower them or give them any sort of skills to get them out of their situation? Or are we truly thinking about where we are putting our sadaqah? The sadaqah is an amana for us, right? We have to think about where we're going to give it. We can't just, without thinking about it, blindly give it to any place we want, right? So this aid culture, where we spend a bunch of aid to different countries, and then this aid eventually vanishes within a matter of days, and then you need aid again. So it's sort of like a black hole for aid, right? Instead, if you, for example, set up a bread factory in Syria, or you set up a clothing factory for Rohingya refugees, or you set up something that would give them the skills to survive and get them out of that situation, that is far more beneficial than just giving them food and water, right? So if any other sister would like to say anything, the money and resources are not going to the right places. The poor are not empowered, and they are not taught how to fish. Yes. So we're giving them food, but we're not giving them the means to earn money for themselves, to find food, right? To buy food for themselves. Giving them food without giving them any resources or any skills to upskill themselves is not going to be of any use to them in the long run, right? So, mashallah, we've had a very good, very enlightening sort of reflective activity, and I'd like you sisters to think about it a bit more after the session, inshallah, as well. So this is it from me. Jazakallah khairan, everyone. Over to you, Sister Amal. I believe we have a charity appeal.
Yes, Jazakallah khair, Madiha, for that. Honestly, it's really, really moving session on, finance in general, looking at a cultural perspective, and especially like an Islamic perspective. I think, especially when it comes to finance, it's such an important topic that's relevant to every single one of us, and we really have to take more time to learn about it and educate ourselves on what is halal and what is not. So before you all run off to make your iftar, I'd like you to draw your attention to the poster on the screen. So UKM, we're raising money for one of our current departments, and this department's name is Eye Care. Now, the Eye Care department have projects which they basically aim to provide support to our local communities. So the current projects we have right now that Eye Care are organizing, so one of them is to provide aid to the vulnerable homeless individuals within our neighborhoods and within our communities. And one of the other projects is providing our neighbors with support and resources, maybe if they're struggling with food, if they're struggling with any other financial difficulty. UKM Eye Care department really aim to try and support them. So please, we've just been learning about how to spend our money. Consider giving either Eye Care department a donation, and it will be very, very much appreciated. So Jazakallah khair, everyone, for attending. May Allah allow us to implement and ponder upon all the things we have learnt today. May Allah accept it from you, Madiha. May Allah accept it from us. And inshallah, we will see you tomorrow at the same time and same link. Jazakallah khair. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone.
Alaikum salam.